This is basically Wonder Woman as Emma Peel. They also taught her Kung Fu, because Kung Fu was popular at the time. And they think women are just going to eat this up. And Gloria Steinem goes to talk to every newspaper and every radio station, every television station that will listen to her and say, this is unacceptable. We have one role model. We have one superpowered woman. You don't take Superman's powers away. You take Wonder Woman's powers away. This is not okay. And it took about 4 years, but eventually DC relented, and they're like, whoops, our bad. And when Gloria Steinem launches Ms. Magazine, which is a prominent feminist journal still around today as a website, launched Ms. Magazine in 1972, you'll see Wonder Woman on the cover of there, back with her powers and back with her original costume. And you'll notice at the top there that we're talking about Wonder Woman for president. And again, unlike the fictional story from the 1940s, this is actually an article about women seizing their political power in the United States. For me in the 1970s, though, Wonder Woman was all about Linda Carter. My parents wondered why I was running around with my headband and my tiara on trying to be Linda Carter. I told them, though, again, this is one of those cases where maybe representation isn't everything. I knew I didn't want to be George Reeves' Superman, which was in reruns. He had a pot belly, and I could actually see the rope he was hanging on when he was flying. I didn't want to be the goofy Batman from the 1960s, but Linda Carter was awesome. So awesome that I worried a little bit when the Wonder Woman movie was coming out. How many people have seen the Wonder Woman movie? So, again, I thought Gal Gadot did a wonderful job. It also did my heart good to know that DC actually reached out to Linda Carter to make sure she was okay with the pick of Gal Gadot. Linda Carter said she was in her second season of filming the Wonder Woman TV show, and she realized that that role was going to define her entire career, and she was okay with that. She said when you inhabit a character like that, that comes with a responsibility, and so she was happy to pass that mantle on to Gal Gadot. But for me, the moment in that movie that really resonated, I'm a father of 2 young women, and this young actress, Emily Carey, there's a scene in the movie where young Diana walks in and she sees the Sword of Destiny off in the corner, and she asks her mom, she says, Mom, that's beautiful. What is that? And her mom turns and she looks at Diana and she says, it's not for you. And the actress looks up and she makes this sly little smile. And that moment, every time I see it, it chokes me up, because that's the reaction I want every young woman in America to have when somebody tells them that they can't do something. And for many, many years in the pages of comic books, myself as a white male, I had lots of role models to look at, lots of ways to see my reality reflected in the page of comics. But it's only been in the last 10 years, 10 to 15 years, that you've really started to see a variety of characters, different ethnicities, different races, different lifestyles. And did Marvel and DC do this because they wanted to promote social causes? No. They want to sell comic books. But as those markets started to emerge and they started to meet the needs of that market, you have seen this huge explosion in superhero movies and in comic book culture. And when I first went to a comic book convention in 1985, it was probably 95% white men in the room. And so much so that if a woman walked in the room, it was like a unicorn had walked in. We'd all stop and say, what is that? Now at Emerald City, it's about a 50-50 split. And again, our comic books and our pop culture is starting to look like the world at large. And with that, I'd like to come back to my opening question. What comic book characters did you all read? And which ones connected with you, and how did they influence you? What are your favorite characters?
For me, I'm older. Well, my son liked all those characters, but Archie.
Archie?
Yes, that's the one I would collect as a kid.
Yeah. And it's funny, by the time I was a kid, Archie seemed old. It seemed like my dad's characters. And part of that was because they were reprinting some of the same comic books that Dad had. But in the 1940s, when Archie was created, Archie was radical. We didn't have the concept of teenagers until the 1940s. In the 1930s and 1940s, we started to create this new demographic. It used to be if you were 14, 15 years old, it was time to go get your own farm. You were going to be an adult. And now all of a sudden we had this whole new growing subculture. And so Archie was this cutting-edge, radical It's like, what are these strange creatures out there? And it connected with, who were your favorite characters in Archie?
I'm not even able to think of all the names. Veronica?
Betty and Veronica were the two big ones there. And it's funny, for years, the culture stayed the same. When I read Archie comics in the 70s and into the early 80s, it read like my dad's childhood. It didn't read like my childhood. And about probably 10 to 15 years ago, Archie finally realized, hey, we'd really like teenagers to be reading our comic books again. And so they added, and actually, if I go back a panel, or back a screen here, oops, in the middle there, that's Kevin Keller, the first gay character in the Archie universe. And when it came out, everybody's like, oh, what's going on? But what teenager doesn't have gay classmates? They start having cell phones, text messaging, depression, anorexia. The things that teenagers are wrestling with in modern society started showing up in the pages of comics. And how ultimately did that pay off for Archie Comics? Well, Riverdale, the CW television series that's based on the Archie Comics, one of the most popular shows with teens in the last decade. In this day and age of streaming and time shifting, where you don't watch TV anymore, you wait and DVR it. Teenagers actually are coming together in groups and watching Riverdale live because these characters resonate with them in ways that they did with people back in the 40s and 50s. Other characters. What else?
Can you imagine someone who doesn't identify with a comic book character?
In today's day and age,
I know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again,
I read comic books.
yeah,
But I never thought about identifying with any of the characters.
yeah. Which comic books did you read?
I read Fantastic Four and the Hulk and Archie,
Yeah,
Richie Rich.
yeah. And why did you read them?
They were there. They showed up with my brothers, and I guess I liked the storyline. As I tended to identify with, if I needed to identify with anybody, it was people, real people in the
Yeah.
popular culture.
Yeah,
I wanted to be Muhammad Ali.
yeah,
I wanted to be a rock star.
yeah, yeah. No, and that's been different pop cultures connect with different people. I had a moment probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. My now ex-wife, one of her coworkers had walked into her office, and he goes, why don't you ever let Andy come over for game night? And she looked at him, she goes, because Andy doesn't play video games. And he says, well, he does comic books and all that other geek stuff. Why doesn't he do video games? And I didn't recognize the fact that when I was in middle school, I played video games and I played Dungeons and Dragons, and that whole kind of, if anybody's seen Stranger Things, everything that went on in the basement in Stranger Things, that was basically my basement growing up. But as cars and girls entered the picture for me in high school, I left video games and tabletop gaming behind. I didn't recognize I was doing that, but I knew these new things were coming in, and I knew comic books for me, because they connected, were staying. So I didn't know I was making that choice. But again, I could see where, being a rock star, music didn't resonate with me until I got into college. So all the way through high school, I was, whatever was on the radio was fine. But it wasn't until I got to college that music really connected with me. So, that's interesting. Again, what was it about Muhammad Ali?
Oh, his wit.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was never at a loss for words.
Yeah, that's for sure. Did you know he fought Superman?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. There was a comic book in the late 1970s, Muhammad Ali versus Superman. It took him almost 2 years to work out all the legal contracts, and by the end, of course, it was a draw because one side couldn't beat the other, and they team up to turn back an alien invasion. But at one point, they've got Superman under the influence of kryptonite and fighting in the ring, and Muhammad Ali has to jump in and save him. Again, that's an example of where comic books have often taken these larger-than-life pop culture figures. Kiss would be another example in the 1970s. If you put Kiss in a comic book, that comic book was going to sell, 3-4 times its normal numbers, because they were another bigger-than-life persona from pop culture that Marvel was able to piggyback on. Yeah.
I've been sitting here thinking,
Yeah.
well, when we were young, we weren't really encouraged to buy comic books. We were rather discouraged from it.
Yeah.
And then as my brothers got older and stuff, they read Archie and a couple others, and so I did go through that. But it's funny, it was clear up until Scooby-Doo came along that I could find a character that I kind of connected with.
Yeah.
It was the girl, the little nerd.
Yeah.
Velma.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of like the whole Betty and Veronica question. Are you a Velma or Daphne? That's another one of those kind of big questions everybody debates in the cartoon world there. Yeah, you talk about being discouraged from reading comic books. I mentioned earlier that in the 1950s, Seduction of the Innocent comes out. From about the late 1940s till 1954, there's a growing movement to ban comic books in the United States. And it always kind of cracks me up because we invented comic books here in the United States, along with jazz, kind of the two great artistic exports that we have as a country. And around the world in the 1950s, in Europe, comic book art is starting to be shown in galleries. They're starting to put out graphic albums, coffee table books of comic book art. It's very kind of going in the art direction in Europe. And then, of course, in Japan, manga is taking off, and it's being aimed at all ages. There's comics for little kids, for people in their 90s. If you're a golfer, you can find a comic book magazine aimed at you. And the whole rest of the world is looking at the United States for this wonderful art form that we've created. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to ban it and put it out of business. In the 1940s, 70 million Americans, basically half of the population across all ages, were reading comics. 50% or 90% of all kids were reading comic books in the 1940s. And by 1954, the comic book industry is almost dead. And still, when in the 1970s, I could read comic books without the teachers yelling at me. And I was lucky that I had a mom and dad who encouraged us, like, hey, he's spending money buying stuff to read. So my parents encouraged that. But there were still the horror stories of, my friends would come to school, and my mom took all my comic books and, burnt them or threw them away. So it took us a long time as a culture to get over that.
I don't think we really had much in the way of comic books
Yeah.
until about 1960.
Yeah. And in 1960, you start to see the baby boomers are starting to come into their own. And that's when, for the first 30 years of comic book history, DC is the big company, so Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And in the 1960s roll around, Stan Lee starts to aim his comic books at teenagers again, and they really start to connect. So you see by the end of the 1960s, Marvel is the dominant force in the industry and has been ever since.
Now, by 1960, I was 15, so, I mean, it just kind of went by me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
But my little brothers, now, they had comic books coming up.
Yeah. And do they still have them? Because I'll take them.
No, I don't think so.
I
I'll
just-
have to check with the one in Portland.
I just have in the last, 5 years sold all of my sons.
Yeah.
I have been storing them. And he started when he was like 8, and he saved every penny to go down to buy a comic.
Yeah, I was so lucky. My dad was a commercial artist. He had a sign shop. And so when I was 10 years old, my dad, the big thing he wanted to beat into me as a kid was work ethic. And I wanted more comic books than I could buy with my allowance. So he set me up with my own show card sign account. And so I would paint window signs for Tom Thumb's Grocery, and I would get $10 a week. And that was a huge amount of money for a 10-year-old kid in 1980. And I could buy all the comic books I wanted. And then all of a sudden I realized I wanted even more comic books. So I got additional jobs to do that. And again, that's just a powerful thing. When you want, you get out and you work. And boy, Dad exploited that. I still to this day don't say no to jobs. I can buy more comic books if I work that job.
And he was always so excited when he'd come home with his new, and he liked all of the superheroes. I don't remember which was his favorite. I think one of the groups was his favorite.
Nice.
Boy, a couple years ago, all gone. I said, I'm keeping them anymore. They're gone. I said, do you want them? No. Do you want them for the kids? No. Do you want the money? No.
There you go. Well, I hope they went to a good home. It's one of the
I hope so.
one of the things that every once in a while I will come across a collection that I will buy, and I will, if it's somebody that I know, it's like I will tell them, here's what it's worth, here's what a dealer will give you for it, and here's what I'll give you for it, and what I will do with it. And then for me, it's always about filling in holes in my own collection, and then getting those comic books into the hands of people who will love them. And
I wish I had them for you because I don't even remember which one it was, but he had a hole from one all the way through, and that was his prized ones. And he also had bought an old one my son is 52, so he bought an old one from, I don't remember, the 30s, and that was all wrapped up and everything. He was, boy, I bought an old one.
The bottom line is we didn't know whether it was worth
No.
a penny or $100
No,
or
I knew whether it was
whatever.
get it out of the garage at this point. That's what it was worth.
And the last person that I bought a big collection from, I knew her through from journalism. She runs is involved in one of the journalism education associations, and she's like, I've got a storage shed full of comics, and again it was her daughter's, and she's like, I've been paying storage fees on this for 20 years and would like not to do that. Can you come get those for me? Yes, I will be happy to come get those for you. So yeah, it's amazing. It's like everybody has a story of comic books from at some point. And I mean, my favorite one here recently is that a home flipper had come in. Had bought an old home, and they were tearing out the walls to flip this house. And comic books were ephemera. They were like newspapers. You just threw them out when you were done. So this person, to insulate the house, had stuffed the walls with paper and comic books. And so they pulled out an Action comic #1, which is, a mint copy of that goes for about $3 million now. This particular copy would have been worth about $600,000. But the guy's like showing it to his wife, who was flipping the house with it, and she grabs it and tears the back cover while grabbing it, and did a couple $100,000 worth of damage to this comic book. But again, the idea that you're changing drywall and you just find this, in preserved condition stuff in the walls is pretty awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. On your seats, you will find that there are evaluation forms. If you could take a second to fill those out. Humanities Washington really uses these to kind of gauge what's going on out there, and I get the feedback, and I use it to tweak my presentation for future presentations. Thank you, everyone.
TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government. TVW, opening state government to the people of Washington, with unedited coverage of the state legislature, the governor's office, and the state Supreme Court, state government agencies, campaigns and elections, and public policy events in all corners of Washington. Plus, our award-winning produced shows and documentaries that offer in-depth, balanced coverage of political events and policy decisions. TVW, opening government for the people of Washington. Stream TVW video and audio anywhere, anytime, from your Android or Apple device with TVW's new mobile app.
This week on Inside Olympia, Washington has a new Department of Children.
Connect with your
Youth,
state
and
government
Families.
through the TVW app, available free now at the App Store or Google Play. Download it and watch TVW anywhere.
Support for TVW provided by
Farming gives you this great feeling of being connected. Sharing local products with cruise ship passengers is a huge opportunity. It really helps sustain local farms.
You need consistent quality and fresh ingredients to make all of our products. Local dairy farms are essential suppliers to us. I feel so lucky to be able to work alongside my family each and every day. Providing fresh local baked goods to tourists makes that possible. Bon appetit!
TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government.
During the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, anything having to do with arts here in Western Washington involved John and Ann Gould Hallberg. So along comes a young man named Dale Chihuly in 1971, and he has a new medium for arts. It's called glass arts. And he wants to develop a kiln and teach students and learn himself even more about how to do art through glass. John said, why don't we locate it on our tree farm up in Skagit and Snohomish County, the Pilchuck Tree Farm. And the Pilchuck Glass School was born. As a kid, I had the pleasure of working for John Hallberg sometimes during my college years. And we came here once, and the foundations were being poured for this glass school. And I said to him, Mr. Hallberg, what are you building? And he said, I'm going to build a place for glass artistry to begin. And that's exactly what's happened here. Not only Mr. Chihuly, but hundreds and hundreds of others have come through this school, taught here, learned here, and taken glass art all over the world. It's a beautiful location, and it truly is one of my favorite places.
Support for My Favorite Places provided by
The Washington Hospitality Association represents a $17 billion industry, employing over 260,000 Washingtonians. In 2016, the Washington Restaurant and Lodging Associations joined forces to support and advocate for restaurateurs, hoteliers, and related hospitality industry professionals. From mom-and-pop diners to worldwide hotel brands, Washington Hospitality helps members succeed through advocacy efforts, cost-effective programs, and exclusive training opportunities. Follow us on Facebook or visit wahospitality.org.
Weatherly Inn, senior living, where it's home and your family. For complete coverage of the Washington State Legislature, live and unedited, on TV and online, turn to TVW. TVW thanks the cable television industry. Cable providers across the state carry TVW for free as a public service, enabling Washingtonians to watch their state government in action. The Citizens Commission on Tax Preferences convenes at the state capitol to receive public comment on state tax policy. Thursday, September 5th at 10 a.m. Live on TV and live on the web at tvw.org.
Support for TVW provided by
I was a straight A student in high school. I actually ended up getting a full ride to Seattle University. I never pictured myself being a heroin addict. My name is Lee Swanson. Helping others has been my solution.
Premier is trying to take a holistic approach to addressing the opioid epidemic. We want everybody to know collectively that we're here to help. We understand people don't choose to become addicted. Let's find the right place for you, and let's just focus on getting you healthy.
You trust TVW and the Impact to show you how the decisions made here impact you. The show is on break for the summer, but not the TVW production team. We're on the road covering legislative and public policy issues across Washington. Enjoy your summer and check out all the new episodes of The Impact after Labor Day on TVW. TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government.
JSOC started about a year and a half ago. I got out of prison in 2017 August, and I didn't even know I could go to school. I'm a veteran, served in the Marine Corps 5 years, did not transition out of the Marine Corps very well, and went to prison. Spent 8.5 years in prison, and through that time the VA says that you get no benefits. So all my GI Bill, all that stuff, I thought they told me it was all gone. It's not true, but that's what they told me. And so I kind of just planned on just a rough life, and I didn't realize that all the help that was out there, and I did not realize that I could have a better life. I could do something other than just trying to fight my way on the streets. So I started school. I don't know if any of you guys have met Colonel Byron Coates. He's also wandering around here. He's got a son who is incarcerated. If it wasn't for that guy, I'd probably still be working on the streets doing stuff, because he's the one that says, no, write these people, and started connecting me with key individuals in the community that got my benefits restarted, got me put into school, and put on the right path. But there's still a lot of hardships getting into school and going through school. And so I was able to meet people who are also doing reentry stuff and get connected, and then I wanted to become a part of that. And Rachel, actually, I met her too through Highline while she was going to college, and because she's also doing some of that stuff, and which is pretty cool. She's been part of the network a little bit. Sometimes I refer people to her. I don't know if she knows that, though. Or used to, anyways. I don't think she works there anymore. And so, Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Rachel. I am also previously incarcerated. So a little bit about my experience is I went to prison. I was gone a total of 19 months. I was in Purdy for 13 months. And while I was there, I didn't really know what life looked like afterwards. I wasn't really ready to change until about halfway through. I ended up joining the track program, which I believe was just talked about in a success story, because I was starting to get the realization, like, I'm going to be 30 years old, I'm going to be released from prison, and I have only work history is bartending, and I don't want to do that because I'm going to stay clean, right? I'm an addict. So I ended up signing up for the track program, and not because I necessarily wanted to join the union. I mainly wanted to stay at Purdy, and that granted me access to do that. So I signed up for the track program so that I wouldn't be transferred to Mission Creek. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Honestly, when I first heard the track program, I thought it was running, right? That's the only thing. I didn't know it was an acronym. So track stands for Trades-Related Apprenticeship Coaching. And I joined that program, and I was in for it. It was a hard program, but just as she spoke about there, Steve Peterman, the instructor, he is seriously one of the best people I've ever met. I still keep in touch with him to this day. But that program is what it did, but I didn't know at the time, was it showed me that I could finish something. So it's very difficult. You're digging a lot of holes. You're carrying a lot of rebar. You're doing a lot of carpentry math, and it takes a lot of discipline. And so I did that, and I finished, and I graduated, and I finished something, right? So then I got released from prison in November of 2016, and I got out, and once again I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I wasn't thrilled about joining the union, but I was like, I'm a felon. What else am I going to do? So basically, I did consider school. I did well in school in the track program, the carpentry, math, all that. I did pretty well. So I basically signed up for, I registered at Highline, and I also set up my union, whatever you do, to join the Carpenters Union. They fell on the same week, and then I was just like, that week when I wake up, whatever I decide is the right thing to do, that's going to be the right thing to do, and that week it was school. So I enrolled at Highline. I once again didn't know what that looked like. I originally enrolled to be a chemical dependency professional, just as addicts do, and but while I did that, so that's where I was going. You know, I had been talking to somebody, I was talking about things that I learned in prison. I would talk about prison, and my eyes would light up, and I would be like, "Can you believe these injustices?" And they'd be like, "Are you going to school for the right thing? Like, I think there's careers that you can base around this, right?" So I decided to instead just get a general AA degree and then pursue a degree in criminal justice. So from Highline, I was at Highline, going to school there. I also got a job. So one thing I will say, so there's a lot of, I don't even remember where this question began, but I'm just going to tell you everything. So the track program, that's part of correctional industries. I'm not going to say that everything correctional industries does is great, but is what I can say is what they do provide for people who work for them in prison, or the programs that people do in prison for them, they actually connect them to resources. So I was able to keep in contact with Steve Peterman, the track instructor. That's something that is very rare, and you're actually not allowed to do with any other instructor in the prison system. They had re-entry people that connect you to employment, so I was regularly talking to my re-entry person, and that re-entry lady, her name's Wendy Martindale, she connected me to a job at Interaction Transition, where I was then going to be connecting people with felony convictions to finding employment as well. I got hired at that job. I ended up getting connected at Highline because I went there and bringing that job into the re-entry that they were trying to form at Highline. So basically that is how I met Lewis here, and that was kind of how my own re-entry began. Am I supposed to get into barriers yet?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah, when I first started going, when you first started going, they didn't have a re-entry program at Highline. There was a person there that worked in the West, and that was it. And she kind of dealt with people from re-entry, but there was no program or vision for re-entry at the college. JJ, who's a student here at this school, and you've also probably seen him running around, he's kind of got the ball rolling in that direction when he was there, because he was also the student body president at Highline when I started, and before he came here. And then from there, I just kind of kept that torch going and pushed it, and also started a club. I didn't want to be in like student body government, because you're more like being told what to do than actually have the freedom to do what you want to do. And so I think that's, if any of you are students and going in, starting your own club opens up a lot more doors. because it gives you some financial freedom to do stuff with your club for going to certain events like this one or other ones nationally. I don't know if you guys have heard of the NCHEP events, they're national events, but it's building a social network beyond just Washington, because there's a lot of things that need to happen in our nation as well as our state. All right, and so yeah, we just wanted to create a space for people to come out of prison and get into education, to further their success in life, and not just accept the barriers that we have been given to us through our circumstances. So some of this, through my college experience, I had a heart for this. I didn't really, my degree is actually in business, but as I started going into English 101 and English 205 and dealing with some of the instructors and because I told everybody about my past. I'm not trying to scare people away, but I also didn't want them, I didn't want any surprises. They can do a background check. Anybody can do a background check and look me up. But I planned on making waves. It's always, I'm going to make waves wherever I go. Maybe that's the Marine Corps side of me. But I see so many things through this experience that need to change. And so my first instructor turned me on to the Netflix documentary 13. And I learned so much through the papers that I started writing. And through 205, they actually had me do a project where I drew this picture as well. And this paper was a 25-page paper that I wrote called Prison Damage, and I drew this this painting with it. But it kind of shows you that there's a missing link within the family structure, and that also represents a community. That the system that we have, it's perpetual, and there's generations within that, and so it goes on. And so you probably have heard many times throughout this event, and if you've been in the system dealing with this stuff for a while, you probably know there's 2.3 people roughly incarcerated right now throughout the U.S., and that's not even counting everybody. I don't think that includes military prisons. I don't think that includes detention centers. I'm not even sure if that includes juvenile. There are 1 in 3 working adults who have been through the justice system, who are justice involved. 1 in 3, that's a third of our nation, working adults, has been affected by the justice system one way or the other. So there's definitely a need for change. And in my experience, coming out of prison, most people try to hide from their past. They try to keep it a secret and shove it under the rug and just try to live life. But that is not going to create an atmosphere of change. Sometimes we got to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations to get the ball rolling in the right direction that we want to be in. And so we've created this atmosphere and made a community on campus. And I don't think this is the exact mission statement that I have, but it's pretty close to it, and so I stuck with it. We are a community affected by justice system involvement, working together to build a support system at Highline College. We encourage civic engagement and create a space where past challenges become future successes and new leaders are developed across campus. My main focus, I was invited to speak at a legislative breakfast, and so I didn't even know those kind of doors could open to me coming out of prison. And this was like 2 months after I got out of prison. And so I'm speaking in front of a lot of legislators and senators and people, like executives from other organizations about my past. And this was on Ban the Box, when Ban the Box was trying to be pushed through Olympia. And I didn't realize that I could do this, and so I was afraid up there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. And so some of the staff's like, just work with me. It's like crossing a river. You want to show them. You want to get to the other side. You got to take them with you to the other side. And so it's like, okay. So I got to think of what the goal is of my speech and what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to lead people in that direction. And I think that's something that we all have to have as a vision of where we're going in life, coming out of the situations that we come out of. And try to bring other people with us. That's important.
Yeah, I agree. Something you were talking about is the change, and something that always runs through my head, which I actually learned in a class. It was an essay by Audre Lorde, and it is called "You Can't Use the Master's Tools to Dismantle the Master's House." And that's why this programs such as these or clubs such as these are so important, because people feel so discouraged, and we're never going to change the system if we're not involved too. And that's the point of it. Even though she was talking on a different circumstance, it's the same exact thing. If previously incarcerated people are not involved in the discussion, nothing's going to change ever. So that is why clubs like these are so important. That's why you say start a club, because the more we're involved, the more we're out there, that's the only way we're going to dismantle the house.
Yeah. It's built systemically. It's got to be torn down systemically. And so, like, one of the things about education too, a lot of people, you have a lot of time in prison. And so I do believe that there should be some sort of educational opportunities in prison to keep your mind going, because it's easy to become stagnant in prison. But it's also, to me, in my experience, it's such a huge part of my transition of being around people not coming out of prison. So my social abilities and skills grew exponentially by being in college when I got out of prison, by putting myself in learning situations and research situations. And so my skill knowledge, my research knowledge, a lot of things that helped me out quite a bit. And it put me in front of a lot of right people. But there's a lot of barriers too. And now we can talk about barriers. And so these are a few barriers. There's a lot of barriers. Everybody knows that going into prison, you're taken out of society. And so, like, my number one barrier is social depravity. There was a time coming into Highline College that I was suicidal. I had PTSD coming out of the Marine Corps, TBI as well. And so my thought processes were not, like, I felt like there were sticks in the gears of my mind that weren't allowing things to spin correctly. And then prison just multiplied that. And then PTSD, there's sometimes I'm just afraid to be in certain situations because of that, and which it compounded a lot of things. And so social depravity, and there's really no help. I went to a counselor on campus, and they told me to quit school because I overwhelmed them with a lot of burdens. It's like, oh my goodness, maybe you should just take a break for a while. But that was not my goal, and I had to learn how to deal with the issues that I had. And so I had to create my own network of help. That's another reason for this club, is because our issues sometimes are unique. And so we can help each other in a lot of ways. And we've created networks that work for us on campus and in the community that are helping people towards success. Integrating into society with the stigma is something that we have to overcome as well. So the influences that we are around, but also the influences that we make, are very important as a club and as individuals. Poisonous thoughts and beliefs about self, those haunt me too. Sometimes I think I'm a monster, not only because of prison, but because some of the things that I've done as a Marine. And which are only compounded. I thought of myself as just a monster. Who can like me? Who wants to be around me if they really knew me? And so sometimes we have to, we're our own worst enemy, which leads into isolation and social atrophy. Because even though we're out in the community, are we still part of the community? Are we isolating even within the face of the public? And navigating systems is definitely not the easiest thing, even though prison is a systemic thing. You come out and you're now in a whole bunch of new systems that are out there that you have to navigate, and it is very hard to do on your own. And so having that network is very important. And DOC, I'm not against DOC, not 100% anyways, but I do butt heads quite often with my DOC officer. I think I'm really lucky to have him though. The things I see, and this is not just for myself, but things I see working with other students, is that they try to help, but they try to help the wrong ways. And so there's a hindrance through the help that they try to do. And that's going to be different for each individual. sometimes is just trying to help him to overcome his own self to be able to work with his DOC officer, and sometimes you just have to, hey, DOC, you're doing too much.
Yeah, I agree. As far as barriers, I'll speak a little bit on my own experience and my experience also working with people who are previously incarcerated. So for my own experience, so in prison, so I go to prison for felonies, right? But I also have DUIs that are in district court. So district court and superior court do not communicate. So about a month before I'm supposed to be released, I get, the counselor calls me in and was like, you have a warrant. You're going to be released, but immediately put into custody in Pierce County Jail. So luckily, because I had support, which many people do not have this, my family worked continuously through that month so I could get it quashed. But within 24 hours of my release, I will also say for my release, they lost my paperwork, so I sat in an office for half the day until they would actually let me out of the prison doors. But then I had 24 hours from the time I was released to check into DOC and go to a court date to be like, here I am for this warrant. And so luckily for me, I had family. I had family that was willing to drive me. I didn't necessarily need the bus pass that they give you or the $40, but a lot of people, before that 24 hours is up, that $40 is gone, their bus passes are gone, and they have no way to get around. And you are required to navigate those systems. For DOC, I was a DOSA, so I had to be on DOC for 25 months, and I did every single month of those. But I went through 3 DOC officers, so that was another thing. There was no consistency. I would get through a little bit of it, and then they were like, here's the new one, and then finally, the last little bit, I had another one, and I can tell you all 3 of those personalities of those people were very different. So my experience on DOC was very stressful because I never knew my DOC officer, right? I had one that was actually quite terrifying, and it was a relief to lose her, but I was also somebody who was really trying to do this, right? I was going to meetings like they told me to. I had gotten a job. I was paying my LFOs, right? A lot of people don't do that. And it was a struggle, and trying to do everything on time. And even now still making my monthly payment to my LFO, I'm just it's stressful because what if I forget? What are they going to do? Are they going to send it to collections? Are they going to take all my money? Because they do that. They don't care. And so there's just so many barriers, and really being on top of them and understanding what you need to do to be okay in the eyes of the Department of Corrections, that I would say was the biggest barrier for me. Even though I was doing good, I was staying clean, I was not doing drugs, I was going to school, I was doing everything, but it was still the most stressful until, even now, I'm off DOC and I still stress, because for some reason my DOC officer told me that I couldn't leave the country. I still had to get permission from the prosecuting attorney that sentenced me in 2015. So I don't know what's real or not. They tell you different things, and trying to really navigate what is actually you're supposed to do, what you need to do, what they want you to do, it's difficult.
Yeah, and that also reminds me too that the other barriers as a student coming out of prison, time just moved so much faster because in prison you have a lot of time on your hands. Out of prison, stuff is just boom, boom. There's deadlines, boom, boom, boom. And so now I'm having to run with the world. You go from crawling on your hands and knees to running just like that. It's kind of like airborne. You're jumping out of an airplane and you hit the ground running. And now things are just moving so fast. And so studying was sometimes not easy. And my first class was actually a law class, business law. I had to read 6 chapters a week. And these chapters are not small chapters. It was a lot of reading. And that was only one class out of 3. And so sometimes finding time to study and just time management was a big deal for me. And that's just me personally. One of the things that I see for most students, though, is finances coming out of prison because they don't have a job. And I don't even encourage them to get a job unless they need it, because counting the cost, what they're going to get at the end of the education could be way better than trying to just scrape by in the beginning. And so if we can get them financial help from the get-go It is more beneficial later on. It's going to make things less stressful in their transition and everything. And there are avenues for that through scholarships. A lot of scholarships go unclaimed. People don't even know that. And there's other stuff through financial aid, and there's a lot of help out there. With the club, I was gonna. There's people that were trying to donate money, and so that was one of the things because I'm speaking out at a lot of these events, and there's business owners that they're wanting to donate $20,000 or $30,000 to put people through school. But that's one of the things that as a club that I could not do. They could donate to the school if they had something already built, but they could not donate to the club or anything that I had going on because we weren't that kind of organization, unfortunately. But yes.
I just had a question after you're done.
Okay, and so I think that's one of the areas that we can grow, because there are people out there that want to help. They do see the situation, but I'm not sure how to get them help. Get the money to where it needs to go.
I was just wondering about what barriers both of you faced, actually at the school, or were there any barriers at Highland?
There are perceived barriers until recently. Actually, coming out of you know those. Coming out of graduation, we started a decarceration day. I was planning on talking about that later. But there's people that found out. They thought the perception was that I'm trying to just glorify myself and what I'm doing, and they did not like my criminal background, and so they wanted to protest what we had going on. Cairo News got involved, or tried to get involved anyways, and a few other people tried to. They were speaking out about it. They were putting posters all over campus, but the security, the president got involved, and stopped it really quickly. There's undercover cops wandering around campus just to make sure that we had our voices heard. So that was actually really cool. But other than that, I've had no barriers other than my own personal barriers where I got suicidal for a little bit.
I'd say for me, when I started at Highland, because even though their reentry is growing so much right now, at the time, as you said, it was barely anything. They were getting letters, and they were thinking that they needed to form something, but they had no money. So for me, when I started at Highline, it was that I was in this by myself, right? Like I was alone. I didn't know how, and I still struggle with this, now even being at the University of Washington-Tacoma, I struggle with this as well, not knowing how much I want to disclose to some people, because I am in classes with a lot of younger people who aren't impacted by the criminal justice system. So I'd say not necessarily feeling comfortable in that environment.
Does anybody have any questions about barriers?
After coming to the event here for 2 days, it seems like that the world offers a lot more progressive movements to help people who have previously been incarcerated. And today, when you've been focusing on your barriers, you've mentioned a lot about the DOC. I don't know a lot personally about the DOC. I work for Division of Child Support, so we do get clients that come in and talk a little bit, like when they're in prison, but they don't elaborate on what you guys are sharing. So it seems like that the world's moving on and creating a better atmosphere to obviously, promote, more growth for people who've been incarcerated. So what do you see that I don't understand about DOC? It seems like DOC's lagging behind.
So DOC's built to lag behind. It's a system, and the system. So you can't look at their whole system on what they're trying to do now, because they have their hands tied because of when they were built and how they were built. And some of it's in the Constitution. So there's a lot of things, laws that are being in place or policies that are going in place that they have to follow. Some of these policies have a perceived purpose of keeping the community safe. Because that's what's being pushed out there quite often is, that's what we all want, keep communities safe. We all want safer communities. But what in reality, when you're placing all these burdens, and having healthy barriers is important. We each have to have our own personal healthy barriers for us to have healthy lives. And that's required for a community and so forth as you go on in a state level and a national level. You have to have healthy barriers worldwide. But you can also overburden people really easily and restrict them from freedom and restrict them from having a healthy life, all in the name of trying to keep communities safer. And so when they have no access or narrow access to success, then only so many people can use some of these resources at one time. And so it's not helping.
How come DOC hasn't seen the advantage of maybe changing, like with me with Division of Child Support, we've kind of been told in the old days, that we were trying to hit them hard, hit them high, and then we're trying to change our, the way we do business.
Hit them hard, hit them high.
I've always been more gentle and kinder just because of who I am. And I've been with them for almost 27 years now. But, so that's why I'm kind of curious is through all these changes and how everyone else is coming in and affecting them, a major shift in this thought process is what's working behind the scenes with DOC to make them a little more balanced and a little more kinder or perceptive as to, obviously you can't jump all those hurdles in 24 hours or 36 hours or 2 weeks or 2 months. How come, what do you see that would need to be put in place, or is that why are they, I just don't understand, why are they so behind?
You go ahead.
So for me, this is what I think. So for DOC, you have to think, the tough on crime era, the 1990s, that's not that long ago. That's very recent. So now we are in a new time. This is a new time where, we're getting this progressive change. And because DOC is so, they operate on these policies, it's something that just can't be changed very quickly, but I think there are entities now that are contributing to making those changes, but before nobody was knocking on those doors. So it's something that it's new. So I think that with time it will eventually change. It's just going to take a little bit longer because what's happening right now, in recent years, as in just the last couple of years, things are just now starting to happen.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes time to you can start change, but you might not even see the fruit of that change for years down the road. And so some things aren't retroactive. You still got people with lifetimes in prison. Guys that come out of prison after doing 40 years or multiple years, they're not going to be the same person, but they only know prison, really. They might think they know what it's like before prison, but they don't. Even 8.5 years, I thought I knew what it would be like to be in the community. 8.5 years, it's not that long. But coming out into society, it's different. Socially, it's different. Things are different. And you had your hand up over here too.
Well, I was just going to comment on your remark, as a formerly incarcerated person as well. You spoke to the movie 13, right? The prison system is steeped in racism, and that hasn't changed. If you listen to yesterday, day one, they talked about if black people were incarcerated at the same rate as white people, 40% of the inmates in this country would be released. If 40% of the inmates are released, how many DOC officers lose their job? How many CCLs lose their job? And so they don't have an incentive to actually meet those goals because then they got to go to work somewhere else. They don't have state jobs. They don't have the great benefits. They don't get the overtime. They don't get to do those things. And so it's kind of like you said, it's systematic.
It is.
It's not just DOC. It's a countrywide problem where people have to decide America's not going to be a racist country anymore.
Yeah, and it's so there's an economic advantage for having a system the way we have it. CI is a huge profitable organization that helps keep buying stuff in the markets very cheap, and so the people like cheap things. You want to buy your car at $20,000 rather than $120,000, You want to buy clothes that are $50 instead of $300. So there's an economic advantage of keeping the system the way it is. It's not right, and I think there's a better way of doing things. But you still have to uproot what has been put in place for there to be something new to plant something new. You're not just going to try to plant a new garden in an old garden. You got to till up everything and get rid of everything that was growing there. But some of that is, some of the advantages. Let's get into some of the advantages because we might go over that. Creating a safe place for a healthy social growth. Some of the change starts with each of us individually. In healing, because, there's a saying that I like. I think I heard it actually the last Summer Institute last year. Maybe not. I don't remember where I heard it. Hurt people hurt people. And so that's whether I'm torn out away from my family, that could hurt my kids. And my son coming out of prison was suicidal, on drugs, a rebel, going out and robbing people. He was just not a very good kid. But being more involved in his life, he's totally turned around now. And so working on restoration on an individual level, being an example, just trying to heal the community and families and the individuals who are out there is a big thing. Creating a learning atmosphere on campus, so that way people can have a chance for success in what they want to do, the areas they want to learn and stuff like that. Resource networking is very important because navigating these systems are hard sometimes, and so being able to help with different resources is and guide people in those areas where they need help, whether it's finances, whether it's food, whether it's homes, whether it's jobs while they can work while they're going through school or whatever, to provide for their families. Civic engagement is an important one for me because this goes what we were just talking about with some of the barriers and overcoming with DOC, because they have to follow their own rules that are set for them by other people that don't work for DOC. WAXA and Voice Academy. How many of you heard of that? Nobody. So this is an organization that every community college, technical school, and college is a part of in Washington. Through this, I have gotten the support of over 400,000 people, grassroots, across Washington. And so when it came to Ban the Box, this is I believe, was great momentum for Ban the Box. I believe this was also a great momentum for the New Hope Act. And so going to this Voice Academy, I was able to present certain bills that I would like to see on other schools also get behind and support. And so I've got 15 other schools behind restoring voter rights this year, which is represents 400,000 people in small communities across Washington. And Civil Survivals, I've linked up with them as well because they have helped guide me in some of the situations of what we want to see happen within next year's legislation. And they're still trying to further some bills, and they also have their own support network in areas of success and things they're trying to do to help create the change that we all need. Valuing self and others through involvement. I think if being stagnant and just getting out and not being involved is doing a disservice to yourself and people coming after you. Yeah, we all have a dream of we want to be successful, we want to get a job and make money, and that's going to be possible either way. So it doesn't mean don't get involved, because everybody has a voice, everybody has an experience that they lived, and it is very valuable towards the change that we need. If it's not being heard, then it's not having this movement isn't having the push it needs. Educating through lived experiences is important. Breaking the chains of stigma and propaganda. We each have to change, but that's part of it, because they often take, through politics and through other stuff when they make policies, they take the worst of the worst and they blanket that across for all of us, when that's not really the case. And so we have these huge laws that are hard to overcome and hard to follow the way they want us to follow sometimes. And it's not always, definitely not right. And so we have to break those chains, We have to overcome those things and show people what the truth is. Being an example for others to follow, reaching out to those who are where we have been. So one of the things that JSOC does with Mary Ware is we go into SCORE jail. It's a jail, it's probably one of the worst jails I've ever seen. But it's owned by 5 cities within King County. And because RJC and King County jails get overcrowded, they don't have room for them. And so the cities have to house them in SCORE. And they're starting to build more jails and more prisons, and I think that's retarded. I mean, why are we spending so much on prisons and incarcerating people when I think this is one of the things that I like the most, when President Obama was our leader, was he did a study that found that if we were to spend 10% more on education, it would reduce recidivism rate by just as much. Yet we still spend more money on incarcerating people than we do on educating them. It's backwards thinking. And so my little advice thing down there was speak out. If you are impacted, whether you have been through the system or not, whether you have a loved one in prison, speak out. You never know who's listening. When I spoke at the last year's legislative breakfast, there's a guy that came up. I've seen him throughout campus many times, but he didn't know my situation. Until I spoke up, he finally got up, and he was ready to give up on life. And he's got 7 kids, a wife, and he can't even live with them because he can't support them. There's so many barriers that DOC was trying to impose on him that he's pretty much homeless. And so just being able to, then he got connected with me, and I made connections for him as well. Advantages for you?
Advantages. I don't really have.
Okay. I think civic engagement is the most important one, because that's where each and every one of us has, there's power in numbers, and the more people we can get to and be civically engaged and to push things, the better. Our voices need to be heard. So Decarceration Day, I think this is JSOC's high point this last year. It was a day that we set aside. We probably could have spread it out through a whole week. It was so full. It was focused on bringing awareness on social justice issues around incarceration, prisons, and detention centers. Because a lot of the things that, just because you're going to prison doesn't mean the same things aren't happening in detention centers. It's also it's another prison, and they use that to make money as well. We want to bring healing and restoration to our community while recognizing the damaging impacts that our justice system have on our families and communities, recognizing that the U.S. justice system both utilizes discriminatory and racist targeting and criminalizing whole communities. Kind of makes sense there. I added that maybe a little bit differently. So we had a bunch of speakers throughout the day on both sides of the fence. Some were victims of crimes. One lady, Judy, her daughter was murdered, and she came out, and she's not against justice reform. She sees the need for it, and she goes into prisons and speaks about restorative justice because she sees the need that people need to be healed. There's people who've been incarcerated for many years and spoke out today on this day. And this whole purpose was to educate people who have not experienced it, who are going through this, and they're going to be our next leaders. And so when is it time to start building those relationships with our leaders before they're leaders, in my opinion? And so we also had a project called the Prison Impact Project. You see a lot of little flags in a little prison there. We went out, and so each person that was been in prison put a little flag in prison. If you know somebody in prison, you put a flag outside of the prison, or been impacted by the prison, you put a flag outside of prison. And if you know somebody who's died in prison, then you put one over there on the little purple pad. You have anything to say on it? Because you spoke at this event too.
I did speak at that event. It was a good event, and I think that it really does have this was the first year. It has a lot of potential, I think, and I think really bringing awareness around just how many people are impacted. And that doesn't mean you went to prison. That means you know somebody who went to prison. It's your family members. It's that disruption of family. And, you know, actually one of the first classes I took at Highline, it was a speech class, which was terrible. But I did a speech on, I think I did it on like the three-strike law or something, but I had opened it by asking, you know, this is a community college, so granted everybody's like 19, I mean as young as 17, but I opened that speech by asking if, how many people in here know somebody who has been incarcerated, and literally everybody in that room had raised their hand. So I think that events like this in community colleges, in colleges, are really good to bring awareness, that because I think people do feel really alone, or that and I think more people are affected than what it seems to be, and a lot of people feel a lot of shame around it, and it really helps to take that away.
Community. So being involved with civil survival, I don't remember what this middle one is. We were on Beacon Hill doing some community partners. I think it might have been Community Transition Partners, an event this last winter. And some school stuff, but community is important. Community is important for everybody. Everybody needs to belong, and so we're building communities, we're healing communities, and we're changing communities. Safety is not in some of the burdens that we put on people. You know, we need to try to remove some of those. Safety is in healing, and not more burdens. Growth. We all need to grow. I think everybody needs to grow. Life is about growing. If you're not growing, then you're stagnant or dead. And I guess that's more metaphorical. But you're not really going probably in a healthy state in life. So there's growth through adversity and there's growth through nurturing. And I think having a healthy balance of each of those is okay. You know, not all adversity is comfortable, but it's something that we can grow through. And we've all probably been through some horrible situations in our life, and just, it's not something that we can hide from or should hide from, but it's something that we should grow from. And nurturing, the healing and helping people who are broken. I definitely considered myself broken for the first year and a half coming out of prison, and in some ways I still consider myself broken. And I need nurturing in some of my areas of my life, and I think that it's true for all of us.
Yeah, I get comfortable at times, but literally since I've been released at the end of 2016, I've been in a constant state of uncomfortableness. So, you know, I went to Highline, I was uncomfortable doing that. I decided to, you know, go to UW, I was even more uncomfortable. Like every step of the way, I'm like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, you know. I got the job at Interaction Transition and I was uncomfortable. It was something I had never done. The opportunity that I found where I was, I actually learned from the FICGN, formerly incarcerated graduate network, Chris Beasley, who's here. But I had seen this posting and I looked at it and I was like, what would this? I work for Amanda Dubois at Dubois Carey Law Office, and I was looking at it and I was like, why is this posting here? Like, why is it here, you know? So I decided to send my resume on a whim, and I did, and I got interviewed, and I got hired immediately, and I just remember trying to tell them, like, listen to me, I'm formerly incarcerated, and I'm an addict, and I'm a terrible person. Like, just listen to me. And they just didn't even bat an eye. They wouldn't listen to me. They were like, you're hired, you're great. And I did, but I didn't know, you know? And so all those feelings of uncomfortableness, what's the word I'm looking for? I embrace. I embrace because every time that I feel that way, I know something, I'm about to level up, basically. And that's how this whole process has been in these last 3 years, is me leveling up. And one thing that I did to do this, and kind of going back to barriers with working in reentry, is I noticed that people, they future trip a lot, you know? Like, a lot of people, housing's a big issue. People get released on that 3-month voucher. I don't know if that ever increased to 6 months. I know that they were talking.
Still in the process.
So it's in the process of increasing to 6 months, but I would work with people trying to get them jobs. They would be fresh out and they're like, I only have a 3-month voucher, and I'd be like, do a pre-apprenticeship program. I'm telling you, you'll get a job, you're going to make a great wage, and people are like, I don't have time. And that's the thing is like, and you had mentioned this earlier too, is really taking a step back and focusing on one thing at a time and doing one day at a time and not focusing on that 3 months ahead, because I would see people waste that 3 months trying to find a job when they could have been done with a pre-apprenticeship program and had a high-paying job by the time it was done. So, yeah, I mean, if you just really focus on one thing, check one thing off, you'll continue to level up.
All right. Open for you all.
So, how did you get around that discomfort? Because I mean, where I work at right now, people have experienced a lot of turnover with the position I'm in, and so I found that they're very hesitant to expect things to go well. For example, like for me to stick around for me to actually be able to help them. What would you recommend for getting past those barriers, those expectations of just things going to, that expectation to be let down?
The expectation for you to be let down?
Well, no. What can I do to help them trust that they won't be let down?
So one of the things that I do with people is being let down is a part of life. They got to face reality. And I don't try to paint a pretty picture. I try to paint it for how it really is, but also the potential of what it could be. Because there needs to be hope. If there's no hope, they're not even going to try. But we have to give them a reason to try as well. When we go into SCORE, that's one of the things I try to do. I associate myself with them, but because I've been where they're at, and then I can show them where I'm at right now. And it's in a better. I think it's one of the best spots I've ever been in my life, even as a Marine. Yeah, Marine was an awesome job, but I've been in some of the worst situations in the world, and done some of the worst things that the world has to offer.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I'll never try and minimize a situation, because there's barriers and things are going to suck, right? And so when I was trying to help people find jobs, for instance, and they would come in very discouraged, I've applied, and I would just have to remind them, you might hear 100 no's before you get that yes. It's just the reality of our situation, and so I think just reminding them, but at the same time, for us, we're both impacted, we were both previously incarcerated, so I think that in my circumstance at least, it kind of brings hope as well, because I'm representing somebody who, has adverse things about them that has triumphed, basically, so.
Okay, I mean, I can definitely be persistent. I want to see if there's something I can do to help people even more so than just persistence.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, or something, because I'm an addict, so I always think working, being in NA, you can carry the message, but you can't carry the addict. And I actually had this problem working in reentry as well, is there was only so much that I can do, but if they're not willing to meet me there, I can't get that job for them. I can't get to that interview for them. I can't do these things for you. You have to be willing to do it. And if you're not willing, then working in that environment, you just have to kind of realize that you're not going to be able to help everybody.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time.
It's hard.
Well, I guess they didn't want to show up. To me, I think, okay, what could I have done better? How can I make them show up next time?
If they know the advantages of showing up, and they still don't, I think you can't make anybody do anything, and that's. You can only be responsible for yourself and what you do, and I tell that to my kids. I have to remind myself of that sometimes, and people I have around me, because sometimes we think that we can control the people around us when we really can't. We can influence them at the best, but we cannot control them. And I think, but giving them the hope, and if you show them if you go down this road, it's where it's going to end up. If you go down this road, this is where you're going to end up. And so it's kind of letting them know where they're at right now and where they go if because if they go down the wrong road, they're going to end up right back in the same spot they were. If they go down the right road, they're going to end up in a new spot. Most likely, it's going to be a better spot. It might be scary on the way there, but if there's people holding your hand on the way there, it's going to be a lot better.
So breaking it down. Okay.
Break it down.
Thank you.
Yeah, vision. I think vision is really important. If people can't see how they get there, then they can only see where they've been. All right. I don't think I have any other questions. Okay, there is my other question. Never mind. So, and these are some kind of things that I thought up, and some of this was from Mary. Helped me out a little bit. So, what advice do you have for those releasing from prison, or to those who are helping people after they've released from prison, through what you've been through?
I mean, I think that's exactly kind of goes along with what he just asked. But basically, because right, when you're pretty stagnant when you're in prison, and then you get out and things are just go, 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 and you have to do all these things. But I think really the best advice is to, which I know this is difficult for some, so my experience is a little different because I had a lot of support, and I got out of prison with privilege. And a lot of people, that's not their experience. So I know this is a little hard to say, but if you can, it's really to focus on one thing at a time, whether that, like you said, don't focus necessarily on the employment if you don't have to. Involve yourself in programs. Because it's not just pre-apprenticeships that there are a ton of programs that connect you to all sorts of jobs. But if you can just take 4 weeks to do one of these programs, you're setting yourself up for something really good. So I'd say really taking it one day at a time and really setting your sights on one thing, and don't get, I think, the juggling of trying to juggle everything and not having it. This is how my mind works, I everything has to be organized in my mind. And so really trying to sit down and not have everything a cluster, I guess. Whether that's writing, whatever you have to do to organize what you need to get done.
Yeah, and I think the biggest advice that I can use is utilize your resources. You have help on campus, utilize your resources. And for those of you who are the resource, let them know what you can do in helping them, and try to line that up with their vision and their goals that they have in life too, because you don't want to overshadow their goals or to invalidate their. Am I saying that right? Their goals. You don't want to make their goals of nothing, unless it's completely wrong and they don't have the right kind of goals to succeed in life, or because they're legally, there's some degrees that I can't do, because I definitely will not be able to get a job legally in those positions. You're never going to see me become a police officer, most likely anyways, or something like that. I don't want to become one anymore anyways. That was a little kid dream. But having realistic goals and being able to lean into your resources. Okay, in your opinion, how can colleges better support the reentry community?
I think that putting as many resources in one place as possible, because that's really difficult. And so when I worked at Interaction Transition and I was helping people, I was constantly sending them to other places of resources I knew. I'd be like, go here to get clothes, go here to do this, and that's difficult, especially when you have to do it on bus passes or whatever. If there is any entity that can give Orca cards, find it and give them with money on it, which there was an organization that helped us with that for a while, but I think it was very limited and then it was over. So if for some reason, or if for some way they can create some sort of entity that funds Orca cards for everybody, that would be great too.
Yeah. I think that is, having a reentry program is if it's not well resourced, then it's not really a good reentry program. Just as we are trying to make a network for people on campus, I think the school itself has to make a network within the community and use their resources and their influences as well to create a network, because it's a community thing. It's a community issue. It's not just an individual issue. It's not a program issue. So I think that's one of the things that they can help out in as well. I kind of want to ask you this question, since you work in the school and you also come from this background.
So, how can schools help in reentry?
Yeah. Improve the help.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of get on my soapbox a little bit, though. I think oftentimes in reentry, we think about like the needs and the challenges that people are facing, and how can we meet those needs and challenges and stuff. I think some of the times what we don't think about is how people sometimes get in their own way, right? Like you're talking about like college, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before someone can even like try to get into college, they first have to like imagine themselves like college as a possibility, and these careers that even require college as a possibility. And I think we often like don't talk about that piece, right? How do we get people from a place of internalized oppression and internalization of these stereotypes that suggest that you will always remain in this lifestyle for whatever position you're in. I think one of the places that colleges can help is by, we're places of knowledge. We sort of help disseminate knowledge. So I think thinking about the dissemination of stories of people that have transformed their lives in different ways, making sure that those stories get people who read them both like inside and on the outside, so that they can start to imagine different possibilities within themselves. And then we can have like all these support systems around people. But until people start to imagine that, I mean, it's hard to really.
That's a good point.
There are only 4% of formerly incarcerated people that have a bachelor's degree, right? That's not because they don't have money. Because even the lowest quartile of income, you still have about 15% have a bachelor's degree, right? It's not because they don't have the intellectual ability, because even people with diagnosed cognitive disabilities, 12% have a bachelor's degree, right? So it's not because of that. So you can look at all these different excuses, and it's not that, right? I think that a big part of it, a huge part of it, is because we don't even see that possibility in ourselves, let alone try to reach it and run into obstacles, right? So I think, knowing how to navigate obstacles and having solutions there, I think that's great. But I think that what we really have to do is try to help people ignite that possibility in people so that we can even help them with those things.
It's very good. Yeah, and that kind of answers your question a little bit too. Does anybody have anything else? Welcome, JJ. All right.
I'm curious, can you elaborate a little more on the housing issue? Like it sounded like for Rachel, you had family, so when you got out, you had some place that you could go. Mm-hmm. And
I did not.
You did not.
So I released to a place where I have. So I came out of Clark County and I released to King County. So I didn't even release to a place where I have family around.
When you're released to King County, does that mean you're required to stay in King County?
I have no travel restrictions.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, and some people do have travel restrictions. I don't.
I did when I had mine. I had travel restrictions.
Yeah, so they can't leave the county or something like that, or they can only go to certain parts. Sometimes they even have restrictions within the county, and they have to avoid certain communities. So there are different. That's different for each individual. And for me, I had to utilize the housing voucher that DOC offers for 3 months until my GI Bill started kicking in. And I'm still in a transition house, actually, even it's over 2 years, because housing is super expensive in King County.
A housing voucher gets you
3 months paid rent
into
a transition house because no other houses.
transition home off of that housing.
Yeah, because rent's too expensive otherwise for anything else. Because a housing voucher is only good for $500 a month, and you can't. I don't even think you can get a studio for $500 in King County.
So it's a DOC housing voucher, right? And so that's actually paid by the DOC. So it's part of the reentry division of the DOC. But they have actually changed that up to 6 months now. And that's only for people that are on supervision. So like a lot of people go back and do the time and come out off paper instead of being on probation or whatever, right? And so if they get out and they don't have any housing or anything, because while you're housed, right, you're not considered homeless. But if you really, so that's one of the problems, so they can't, like, in advance start accessing some of those resources, right? Because they're considered housed.
Yeah.
While you're incarcerated, even though you don't have an address, right? So there's some things that could happen, some tweaks around there that could help out.
And there's certain organizations in the community that will help you once you become homeless. So you have to get out of the prison and live on the streets for a certain amount of time before they can even help you.
I could expand, it has me thinking about like an expansion of my answer earlier, but you know, universities can also serve as like a reentry hub for people, right? Because like if you have housing, you have food, you have structure, you have work study, right? When I got out of prison, like school was my reentry support system. You know what I mean? Like I had financial aid and stuff like that, right? And like I got a work study job that helped me envision a different future for myself. I wasn't like just doing manual labor stuff, but I was actually doing office type stuff. So it really was the vehicle for my reentry, and especially for people that have done a long time in prison, you get institutionalized.
Yeah.
And universities are institutions too, right? And so if you have meals already set for you, you have a place, and you don't have to worry about it, so it gives you some time to adjust. So I think that's something that...
So you're saying you take some of that money that they're wastefully spending somewhere else and maybe actually build a form of, you know, that kind of environment that would actually house.
I think it's mostly there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just, well, but then when you go back to the safety thing, depending like, are you going to, when people are feel uncomfortable, we have to get over that.
Oh, yeah.
burden. So that's how do you incorporate, these are big, hard questions to answer. How do you incorporate that, these people who are coming out, I don't want to say offenders today, you know, then how do you incorporate it into where everyone else in the general public is going, knowing that, oh, on that end of the campus, so I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm thinking it's more than possible, that it requires a change of thinking.
It does.
For that,
You got to educate people. Right?
Yes.
You got to educate your campus community. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing is Justice Involved Student Group on Evergreen Campus, right?
Right.
Educating people. So, for example, one of the things that in talking to housing, right, they're like, well, who are you worried about the most? And they're like people that have crimes with sex crimes in their background and arson and everything. And I'm like, well, did you know that they have the most intensive supervision than anybody when they get out? And so the CCOs are already coming to campus police. They're coming to the housing people and letting them know. And what's happening here is a lot of times it's the CCOs that are saying, oh, it's not a good fit, right? And so a lot of that is education. And so what I'm trying to do is work with Thurston County CCOs, work with police services, work with RAD, right, to educate and build a system, a supportive system where we can make these decisions thoughtfully, but we want to take that box off our housing application because it's really redundant, right? Because people that they're so worried about, right, which recidivate at a lower rate than anybody else, by the way, right, are already having to report to police services and stuff like that already. So a lot of that stuff is just lack of education and misunderstanding.
Right.
So,
but you're right. And like 30 years ago, would you have let a gay man like watch your kids, right? Or would people have let a gay man like adopt a young boy? You know what I mean? Right. So you're right that is there, right? And it is very powerful. But sober attitudes toward like gay men 30 years ago, right? And look where we've come. But you're
well, I totally agree with him that we got to stop doing the rate. If I just watch TV all night, and if I watch TV all night, I'm thinking, cha-ching, we're going to be building some more prisons, when I watch TV every night off the news. Which in reality is, God is it's making the world a scary place. So what are we going to do to help if people feel like it's not that scary? And if they took the money away, from, like you said, they waste so much money, and put more into some kind of education and give people hope, because whether you've come, you know, like I've never, obviously, I have had one family member that's been incarcerated, so I have not intimately been involved with that. He lives in another state. But even on a general level, in the general public, you have to push yourself past a level of uncomfortableness and understanding to be accepted in society and in general. And it's just harder for everyone who's been incarcerated because of the stigmas that have gone with it, and you guys are working hard to help break that down.
Because we internalize those stigmas, right? We watch TV too.
Yeah.
And we see that, like, you know, so-and-so committed a crime, and they just committed these other crimes, and so we're also hearing that, like, people who go to prison continue to be bad, continue to commit crimes, and continue to go back to prison.
Well,
and I think that's part of the role of the university as a disseminator of knowledge too, is to counter those narratives, right? Because we know that the dominant narrative is one of, like, risk and failure, and that we have to promote those alternative narratives.
Well, and I'm with Rachel that we need to have a one-stop shopping for this, because like this is my second time being to the Summer Institute, and I'm amazed at how much progression has already occurred. I didn't make it to the one last year. And if there was a one-stop shopping for everyone to kind of understand, then even when I'm talking to my clients on the phone, I could say, oh, blah, blah, blah address, I know by heart, you know, to help go there, and then they have all these things that we can have to look at. And then the more and more that we understand in the general public that there are so many resources out there for people who feel like they're struggling to get back on their feet, then in turn we all are going to start helping each other in one way or another, whether we intimately know you or not. And then I think in turn that makes, in general, people have hope that the society can be turned around.
Yeah.
Can I put a plug in for something?
Yeah.
So if people want to see alternative narratives and success stories and share those, you can follow the formerly incarcerated college graduates network on social media. So we're somewhat on Twitter, but mostly on Facebook. Also, Corrections to College California does a pretty good job of highlighting the stories and stuff too. So it's one place to run into those kind of narratives.
The National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. They're really about reimagining communities and decarcerating women and girls, but they do include kind of everybody. So really about decarceration. There's a lot of movements that are happening, mostly kind of in the East Coast area, and now we're getting involved over here. There's also the formerly incarcerated and convicted people's movement. So there's things that are kind of, there's a lot of information about what people are doing all over the nation.
I think also we have a system here. The U.S. doesn't have. It's not the only system in the world. And I think to really look at how our justice system operates through conviction rates, through incarceration, and through reentry, I think it's also a good idea to look at other countries and how they are doing, running their systems. We might not have the worst, I don't know. I know we have the highest incarceration rates, we have the highest prosecution rates, all that stuff, but there's definitely a lot better out there. I do know that. I know the Germanic countries and Norway and stuff like that, their recidivism rates are way, way lower than ours. Where ours are close to 80%, depending on what you might define recidivism as. Theirs are more like 12%. I think it's the right number. It's been a while since I looked at the numbers. But there's a lot of, and they had a system very similar to ours, like 20 years ago. But they've had to gone through a lot of restructuring their system to do what they have accomplished. And it's not easy, but we need to do the same thing. And because we wouldn't be having housing issues if we weren't taking people out of the communities where they were living to begin with.
And to piggyback on that, right, one of the things, so in both systems, like the Nordic system and the U.S. system, right, safety is the #1 concern, right? But you know how they go about safety over there? It's through dignity and respect. And, that's how, and over here, they go from safety to violence. Right? So violence begets violence, right? Dignity and respect begets dignity and respect, right? And so, if you base your system on that, then the natural outcome is going to be lower recidivism rates, and you're going to have better programs, education, and stuff like that.
People need to be treated like people. Yeah. All right. I don't have anything else. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government. You trust TVW and the Impact to show you how the decisions made here impact you. The show is on break for the summer, but not the TVW production team. We're on the road covering legislative and public policy issues across Washington. Enjoy your summer and check out all the new episodes of The Impact after Labor Day on TVW. TVW now brings you state government in high definition. Thanks to Comcast, TVW is available in high definition on Comcast Channel 320 in most areas. On TV, online, on Facebook, on Roku, and now in HD. More ways TVW is bringing your state government to you. TVW takes you back in time with historic Washington. Looking at the people, the places, the history, and the beauty of Washington's past. It's back to school for kids and new favorite places for you. Join us right after Labor Day for Premiere Week on TVW. Explore more of Washington State with all new episodes of My Favorite Places with Ralph Monroe. Catch them on air and online at tvw.org.
Support for TVW provided by
The Washington Hospitality Association represents a $17 billion industry, employing over 260,000 Washingtonians. In 2016, the Washington Restaurant and Lodging Associations joined forces to support and advocate for restaurateurs, hoteliers, and related hospitality industry professionals. From mom-and-pop diners to worldwide hotel brand, Washington Hospitality helps members succeed through advocacy efforts, cost-effective programs, and exclusive training opportunities. Follow us on Facebook or visit wahospitality.org.
TVW now brings you state government in high definition. Thanks to Comcast, TVW is available in high definition on Comcast Channel 320 in most areas. On TV, online, on Facebook, on Roku, and now in HD. More ways TVW is bringing your state government to you.
What's it mean to be Washington State's only public affairs network? We're committed to providing you unbiased coverage 365 days a year. Our team works across the Evergreen State, tracking down stories you care about. TVW works in the classrooms to help students learn about civics by engaging them directly in the legislative process and connecting them with your state legislators. We bring you a front row seat to all things Washington State, From the Palouse to the steps of the Capitol, TVW is your voice for all things political. When you become a member, you're making a commitment to the important public service that is TVW. As a friend of TVW, your contribution goes to support TVW's award-winning documentaries, programming, and the gavel-to-gavel coverage you count on throughout the year.
TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government.
Unfortunately, because it is a property crime and it is viewed sometimes as a little bit less important, particularly when compared to things like assaults and armed robberies and homicides, it didn't get the attention it deserved.
We work in an undercover aspect, which means we're in plain clothes, unmarked vehicles. We get target locations, go out and search for stolen vehicles, sometimes follow those stolen vehicles to where we can go from the smaller fish to the bigger fish.
Auto theft. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, a vehicle is stolen in the United States every 40 seconds. Did you know that Washington ranks among the top 5 states in the USA when it comes to auto theft? And did you further know that there's a state-funded organization whose mission is to reduce auto theft in the Evergreen State? Our topic on Field Report, of course, is auto theft in Washington, a subject that we bring you in part with a close-up look at a vehicle break-in. We begin our story with video surveillance footage of a Washington auto theft obtained from law enforcement. In this clip, we see a suspect in a green coat walk past a vehicle. The suspect then returns and begins to break in. In a short amount of time, the door to the vehicle is opened and the suspect is able to start the car and drive it away.
They are typically stolen for joyriding or even just to get from point A to point B. The auto thieves that we've dealt with and I've dealt with in the recent past have been primarily, we're going to steal a car, we're going to drive it until 1, it either gets recovered, or 2, we destroy the car.
Auto theft has been a major issue in Washington for many years. During the 2006-2007 legislative session, lawmakers recognized a need to confront auto theft.
Well, this is a good bill. It's something that we have worked on for years to do something about auto theft. It's perhaps not a perfect bill, nothing we ever do is, but it is something that I think goes an awful long ways towards helping us with one of the more serious crime problems we have in the state of Washington. So I would ask everybody to vote for this bill.
There's a lot of good things that happen in this bill. I'll tell you that the issue of auto theft has been a concern for the law enforcement community for years. And the fact that people continually steal cars and nothing really happens.
During the interim, my nephew Sam, his vehicle was stolen. It was just a little pickup truck, and that was in Black Diamond. My nephew Trevin got his car stolen, and he's only 16. So it was a little beater too. But also my son's car got stolen. Now all this happened within 5 months, and my car got broken into. This is not the issue of the day or issue of the session. This has been going on and on and on. It is time to address it.
Despite some disaccord over the organization's funding mechanism, which we'll touch on in a minute, lawmakers passed the legislation that created an organization dedicated to fighting back against auto theft.
The Auto Theft Prevention Authority, and what it does is it puts a $10 surcharge on all traffic tickets statewide. That goes into a fund. It's $5.6 million per biennium, and of course it goes up and down depending on the amount of traffic tickets that are issued. But those dollars are then dedicated to prevention and funding task forces around the state. And we here at the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association work with a board that oversees the Auto Theft Prevention Authority, and they basically review, evaluate, and distribute those grant funds around the state to fund task forces that can really focus on and go after the most prolific offenders, those few people that are stealing a lot of cars. And if they can take out those prolific, high-frequency offenders, they can make a real difference in terms of driving down those numbers, reducing the amount of vehicles that are being stolen.
Strand further spoke about the impact auto theft can have on Washingtonians.
Sometimes people view auto theft as a minor property crime. Well, if somebody gets their car stolen, it's certainly not as significant or as serious as other types of crimes. And that's true, but the fact is, it's an incredibly impactful crime, and the victims of auto theft tend to be the people who can least afford it and are the most affected by it. When I served as a chief, I would often tell my officers, you know, the folks that we're working for, it's that single mom who is doing her very best. She's taking her kids to daycare, she's working at her job, and she's got that 25 or 30-year-old Honda Accord that she's trying to keep running, and she simply can't afford something more expensive. She can't afford a lot of insurance on that car. Maybe she can't afford insurance at all. And she's struggling, trying to make ends meet day to day. And for somebody to break in and take that car, think of how that affects her. She can't get to work, she can't get to daycare. She certainly is not going to get replacement value on that car to get a car of the same quality from the insurance company if she has insurance at all. All of those things start to roll up, and it can really make a family or a group spin out of control. And that can seem counterintuitive, but it really can.
To further understand why certain Washingtonians are impacted more by auto theft, it helps to know which cars are stolen most often. According to Washington State Patrol data, 27,700 vehicles were stolen in Washington in 2018. On a county level, King, Pierce, Snohomish, Spokane, and Clark counties reported the highest auto theft numbers. Taking the data a step further, here are the top 10 most stolen vehicles in Washington by make and model. These are the top 10 most stolen vehicles in Washington by year, make, and model. Now, when you see the list of most stolen vehicles by make and model, you might be taken aback, thinking that those used sedans aren't even all that valuable anymore. However, according to local law enforcement experts, those vehicles are among the easiest to steal.
The big picture that folks need to know, and this is really important, I think, is that basically the most commonly stolen vehicles by far are 20-year and older, mostly Japanese-made cars, Hondas, Nissans, Toyotas, Subarus.
A principal reason why older 90s era vehicles can be more easily stolen is due to shaved keys. Detective Crucy showed TVW some of the keys used for auto theft.
What they'll end up doing is filing down the ridges because the cars are so old that the cylinders of the ignitions and the door locks are pretty loose. So they'll just put it in there. They call it a term of jiggler key. They'll put it in, they'll shake the key until it's able to turn, and once it turns, they're off to the races in the car.
Rather than finding more footage of auto thefts, TVW worked with Detective Crucy to demonstrate just how easy vehicles can be to steal with a generic bump key.
This is a 97 Honda Accord, pretty easy to steal. Lock position in the ignition. And you can take the key out and the car will continue running. This is a Chevy key, shaved Chevy key. We're looking at a Ford here. And we've got a locked door. So again, Chevy key, Ford. The door doesn't work though. Oh, there we go. Door's open.
With all that's been said and shown in this story related to auto theft, the ways that experts provide to keep your vehicle safe are simple.
If you have that 25-year-old Japanese make car, what's the most effective deterrent? And it is the club. There's lots of other answers out there. The club is the way to go. It's a good deterrent, so if a person is looking to break into that car, they see the club, they know it's going to be much harder to use. And if folks aren't familiar with a club, it's just a big piece of metal with a lock on it. You extend it out so that there's large sort of prongs that come out from the steering wheel. It just means that the steering wheel can't be turned in each direction every way, so it's hard to steer that car.
It's a waste of their time. It appears I have not seen a vehicle that has a cut steering wheel. I have not seen or recovered a vehicle that has a club cut in half on it. So I can't be 100% on there saying, yes, the club's going to stop everything. It makes the car look less attractive. If you're looking for time to steal a car versus a car with a club, it's going to take that much more time. They might not want to do that and might want to move to the next car down the road.
Support for Field Report provided by
The Pacific Northwest is the cornerstone of the BNSF railway network. It's also home to nearly 4,000 BNSF employees who share our commitment to safety. From investing billions in advanced technology and railway upgrades to inspecting our tracks twice as often as required by federal law, we're working to carry the products we all use in the safest, most efficient way possible. BNSF Railway, connecting the Pacific Northwest since 1873.
For complete coverage of the Washington State Legislature, live and unedited, on TV and online, turn to TVW. TVW thanks the cable television industry. Cable providers across the state carry TVW for free as a public service, enabling Washingtonians to watch their state government in action.
Support for TVW provided by
A commitment to strong communities. That's what PEMCO Insurance is all about. Since 1949, from Linden to Longview, Walla Walla to West Seattle, we put our members first, making sure we give back so we can all move ahead. Whether it's providing a chance for those who might not otherwise have one, or supporting TVW to help improve our corner of the world, PEMCO cares about the same things you do. We believe in TVW's mission and in transparent government, because informed citizens benefit all of us.
You trust TVW and the Impact to show you how the decisions made here impact you. The show is on break for the summer, but not the TVW production team. We're on the road covering legislative and public policy issues across Washington. Enjoy your summer and check out all the new episodes of The Impact after Labor Day on TVW. TVW, for more than 20 years, bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of Washington state government.
Welcome to the University Bookstore, the oldest independent bookstore in Seattle. We actually have over 300 events a year here, so if you're interested in finding out more about those, you can check out our website and various social media platforms. But tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Patricia Murphy and Will Jimerson Jr. as part of our Thursdays with KUOW series. KUOW reporters give us behind the microphone insight into their reporting. We have 4 more exciting weeks of the series, so please check out ubookstore.com or kuow.org for more details. Now, a selection of books is on the table just behind you, a couple of which were picked out by tonight's speakers. And now the store does close at 7. However, we're free to stay here for the duration of the event. So at 7, this will just become an exclusive after-hours event. I will be holding one of the registers open downstairs for 15 minutes after the event ends if you want to purchase anything. And finally, if you parked in our parking lot back here tonight, you can come see me after the event. But now, Kristen Leong from KUOW will introduce tonight's speakers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Kristen Leong. I'm KUOW's Community Engagement Producer. We're glad that you guys are all here. If you have your phone out tonight, we know that you are just tweeting or Instagramming along with us. If you're social media friendly, our hashtag tonight is KUOW Engage. Hopefully folks at home will be joining us online. I am so excited to introduce Patricia and Will. Patricia Murphy is an award-winning radio journalist and news anchor. She is KUOW's public health and justice reporter. Her documentary on IV drug use won her an Edward R. Murrow Award. Her work has also been recognized with awards from the Public Radio News Directors Association, alongside journalists. In and out. Yeah. Patricia worked on this series in collaboration with our other guest tonight, Will Jimerson Jr. I have Will's bio here. Will is a community and youth advocate who works as a program manager at the Urban League. He received his certificate in sociology and philosophy from Ohio University and graduated top of his class from Bellevue College. He is currently the program manager at the Urban League of the Metropolitan Seattle, where he leads a program called GROOM, the Gifted Regardless of Oppressive Methods program. And actually, what I wanted to do to introduce this is read an excerpt from Patricia's essay explaining how she came to work with Will and how they brought this series to life. The essay opens with Patricia explaining that she first met Will at a King County Council meeting. He was presenting and he was telling a story about how he drove a teenage boy to school every day to keep him from carrying a gun. She goes on to write, I wanted to give these young men a voice on our air, but would they even want to share their story with me, a white woman who had never lived their struggle? But I understand what they were telling me. I could just use my loud teacher voice. Yeah? I wanted to give these young men a voice on our air, but would they want to share their story with me, a white woman who had never lived their struggle? Would I even understand what they were telling me? So I went to Will Jefferson Jr. and asked him to partner with me. Will is a youth mentor and community advocate. Jefferson's work with at-risk and justice-involved youth requires deep commitment and it's round the clock. Will is skeptical at first. His experience with the media hasn't always been positive. He spent much of his early life in prison, and he was keenly aware of how the white lens could reinforce stereotypes. But I could tell he liked my idea, so we devised a plan. He would conduct the interviews, and I would edit them. Together, we would get this right. Please give a warm KUW welcome to Patricia Murphy and Will Jefferson Jr.
Thank you so much for coming out to talk about this really important and timely topic. And thanks, Kristen, for that really nice, generous introduction. It's so good to have this conversation, especially right now, because I think it's been about 7 days and we've had about 4 shootings. It's something we read about every day. And I know the national narrative has been about mass shootings, but I really feel like here in King County, in the city of Seattle, we need to pay more attention to what's happening. So that was part of the reason that I'm so glad that Will was able to partner with me on this project. It wouldn't be anything without your company.
Thank you.
It's a little credit from a friend here. So I feel like the most important thing we can do right now is just let you know we have a... Oh, here we go. How's that? All right. Thank you. One of the most important things I think I can do now is just show you specifically who we're talking about. Why would a young person consider carrying a weapon? And we can do that with the experiences that we were able to record. So let's just play. This is Millionaire Lavish. And
my name is Millionaire Lavish. I'm 18 years old and I'm in the struggle. I'm going through it right now, man. I'm by myself. I'm not cool with my dad. We got into it. My mom been gone out of my life since I was 2, so I didn't really know her like that. I just graduated out of high school. I'm homeless right now, and I'm in the streets. And I'm beefing with a lot of people. It's not that big of a problem to me because I know that sooner or later I get through it.
And that's very, very, very difficult, very hard. Just sitting here listening to, just being honest with you, you know, I know that you're being candid and you're being open about, you know, some of your struggles you've been faced with, but to know that you're facing them now, you know, how did it get to the point where the violence that you've been exposed to, you felt like it was a matter between life and death, like I need to have a gun to protect myself, you know, like how did it get to that point?
When my brother got shot.
Yeah, man, that's and you say you're 18 now, and how long ago was it when your brothers had, you know, got shot?
Well, it happened twice. The first one happened 2 years ago, and then it happened again last year. Well, no, a couple months ago, I should say.
And how was that experience? Like, what was you thinking when that situation had happened? Like, what was going through your mind?
To be honest, bro, I was just thinking about, look, I gotta kill these guys. I gotta kill them. That's the only thing I was thinking about, because it's like, it came off guard. You feel me? I was loafing. I was just chilling, and when you hear bullets, you just think, like, damn, what's going on? And then when the bullets are coming at you personally, you gotta be on your P's and Q's. So you gotta think like, man, you gotta get them before they get you. If I don't carry my gun on me, and I'm out here, and I'm homeless, so I'm out here 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever, all the times in the morning and late at night or whatever, and I see somebody I'm beefing with, and they might got a gun and I don't, and they shoot me, it's gonna be rest in peace to Lavish, you feel me? But it's easy to get a gun these days. You make one call, you can have your first 22 caliber gun that can fit in your pocket. You can get whatever you want, you feel me? I can't get it in the store, but I bet you I can get on the streets.
Let's just put it out there. Is that something that you want to do? Is that something that you want to live?
Oh, of course not. Heck, no, that's the first way to jail. I mean, honestly don't, because, bro, think about it. I don't got my license for no gun, so it's like I'm not supposed to have it. And with a gun, you can go straight to jail, and it's not like something that's popping. People play with guns for fun, and some people do it for a reason. I have a reason. It's like, if I don't carry a gun, I'm going to die literally in the streets, you feel me? And with the gun, personally, I'd rather get caught with it than without it. I'd rather the police take me to jail, and I'm just living in jail, I mean, it's not good to say it like that, but I'd rather have it than get caught without it, because if I get caught without it, then I'm gonna die.
So that's Millionaire Lavish, and his story is not unique among the kids that we're talking about. He actually fears for his life. He has a reason to fear for his life. And for the first time, King County actually started collecting data on gun violence in 2017. And believe it or not, nobody ever really asked the question before 2017. And this was not an easy task. To do this, they had to coordinate with a lot of police departments that nobody shared the data, nobody tracked the data the same way. There was no real way to figure out how many shots were fired, how many people were shot, how many people were charged. It was just not done. So they embarked on this effort. They got a really small team of people and actually hired like a data scrubber guy who was a former military guy who came in and scrubbed all the data for them so that they came up with some information. And they learned a lot. And one of the things they learned, and these are really simplified graphs, by the way, but I want to make sure that I get the language right. In 2017, 83% of shooting victims were male and people of color. In 2017, King County prosecutors charged 26 people involved in shootings with murder and manslaughter. 85% of the people charged were black or brown. 53% were under the age of 25. We know who we need to talk to, and we know who we need to reach, and the county would love to use this information, I think, ultimately, to reach them sooner, right? To quote Dan Satterberg, the best way to get a kid to not use a gun is to not have him pick up a gun in the first place. But just knowing this information isn't really enough. Just having it isn't enough. One of the most interesting things they learned was about the relationship between people who witness, are shot, and are victims of gun violence, who perpetrate gun violence. Those relationships mean things because if you witness a shooting, the likelihood that you will be involved in one way or another in a shooting or some kind of violence down the road is much higher. They know that. We know that. The county, now that it has this information, needs to address the issues. And that's been their challenge. And I think Will can really speak to that challenge.
Yeah. In light of the research that was taking place, in light of the research that had been taking place with King County, and as well as with the prosecuting attorney office, they came to myself and a few others who are doing legwork in this regard of trying to keep our young folks alive as best as possible with a lot of different opportunities and options. But one thing we was clear about when we spoke with them is that, unfortunately, we didn't need the data. This is the stuff that was actually showing up in our communities. It was showing up in our personal lives. And they had showed the grid, provided a grid 2017 with some caricatures depicting shooting victims and those who actually died. And my actual cousin, my first cousin, was one of those victims who was not only shot early in the year of 2017, but he also was killed a few months later in April 22nd of 2017. So it was more than just a pie graph for me. It was very personal, and it's been very personal. And so looking at the language, the data, we knew that we had to do something. And you talked about the social analysis network. That's what it was called in terms of the degree of separation, in terms looking at the data of those individuals, if they were to witness a shooting or their friend or somebody was involved in a shooting, the likelihood of them becoming a perpetrator or a victim, they will see in a connection. So that was like, what do we do? And so we're still kind of at that standstill of looking at these young folks, because what the prosecuting attorneys are saying, these people have not committed a crime. When they look at the social analysis network, they have not committed a crime. They just been involved in where they was able to witness a situation, or their name just came up. So what do we do? But they're under grid. And it was like, we don't want to wait until they either become a victim or they become a suspect. So they came to persons like myself, Dom Davis, and others to kind of do the work that we're doing currently.
One of the things that the county knows when it does its social analysis is that there's a lot of unaddressed trauma, right? When Charlena Lyles was shot by the police, there was an entire building of people who were traumatized. There was an entire community of people who were traumatized. That's what I see as a reporter. I see a victim, but I also see the radiation of trauma from that event. The county realizes this, but the risk of not treating trauma is more trauma, is more pain, is post-traumatic stress. You know, we spoke to someone named Seville during our reporting project, and I think he sums up pretty clearly what happened to him after he was shot. And I just want to stress before we play his tape, he was 12 when he was shot. He was 12.
I never heard a gun like that before. It was like a firecracker, you know? I didn't know what was going on until I heard something hit the car, bang. I'm running, and then bang, shoot. It's like a jet. As it drives off, I start screaming for help. I'm like, bro, help. Like, no, come get me. Nobody comes, so I just hop back up. And I start hopping across the street to my bro's house. One police officer came, and he asked us, like, what did the shooter do? Which way did he go? We told him, and no other cop ever came back. I'm sitting in the yard for over an hour just bleeding. And then finally the ambulance get there and they're like, are you sure you're shot? Because you're like a little too calm, you know? I'm like, what? As soon as I got to the hospital, I didn't even go into the room yet, and gang unit, the police gang unit, walks in with dogs and stuff, and they're, what were you doing, this and that, who shot you, who are you beefing with, you're in a gang, you were in the South, and that's what they said to me, like, you're in South Seattle, who was it, you know? It had to be gang rivalry, you know? I didn't know anything. The police, soon as I said I didn't know anything, they lost interest in me. All throughout my life, I've just been blessed to have elders talk to me. They're like, when you're black, it's not gonna be that easy for you growing up. I didn't used to think like that. I used to like, bro, you're tripping. Like, I'm the same as anybody else. Like, when that happened, it like messed that thought up. Like, this police really just disrespected me, like disrespected my whole character. It just made me wake up like, I'm never gonna trust anybody that says they're anybody. They're not who they say they are, you know? Not everyone is who they say they are.
So that was Seville. No one ever followed up with him after he was shot. He recovered medically, right? But nobody ever stepped in and said, hey, you know, he had elders, right? That's what he said, I had elders who told me things about the world. But this terrible thing happened to him, and he never got treatment. He never got any care. And I think later in this piece, what he told us was that he had a hard time. Every time he played basketball or started talking about it, pain, you know, like he could feel that physical pain again. So the county's commitment to this problem at this point has really centered on this, and that is its commitment to no longer jail young people. That's what the county says. Zero youth detention, their commitment to zero youth detention. That's driving a lot of these questions, and it's driving a lot of money through the Best Starts for Kids program towards programs that are trying to help. At the same time, we're building a brand new Children and Family Justice Center. Why would we be building a new jail if we weren't going to be jailing kids anymore? That's a really legitimate question. And the group that has held the county accountable for their actions and this project has been the No New Youth Jail movement. I feel like they're a very important part of this dialogue right now because they will not allow the county to build this building without answering for what it says it's doing.
Correct.
And maybe, Will, you can speak to a little bit more of the jail issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues, a lot of hoopla, a lot of jargon around this particular hot topic, and it remains a hot topic, especially in marginalized communities. Those who are on the far reaches of society. The reality is those of us who are with the No New Youth Jail movement, you're looking at this particular investment. This is over a $230 million investment going into this particular facility. And we're talking about a reinvestment, a redistribution of these resources that would prove to be a lot more sustainable for different communities, different people, be a lot more, have more positive impacts if the redistribution of these resources were put in play in a much different way. And so the issue around the No New Youth Jail is when you spend over $230 million to build a facility, you have to think about a reality of any kind of business. It's a business. You have to be realistic about the functionality of it. This is a business. And any business that's trying to be, in terms of their model, to be successful, you're thinking about the ROI, the return on the investment of $230 million plus dollars that are going into the investment of this a youth prison, a youth jail. Just think about that. Putting those two, concepts together, youth in prison, youth in jail. Why can't we say youth, being astronauts or youth doing something different that will give them a better uptick? So that's where a lot of the controversy is coming in. And then there's some of the players are saying, oh, you know what, we'll do an investment, like Patricia mentioned, through the BSK funding, Best Starts for Kids. So what that is money that's coming off the housing levies. So it's actually your tax dollars going into all of these different things, and then people are coming up with different ways of how it fluctuates. So what happens is organizations such as the one I work at, we have to petition back for the money that is naturally, rightfully so, is our money. And we're saying we want to work with the young folks, and then they provide these stipulations around that. But the money that they do put out there is nowhere near $230 million plus dollars. Right? It's actually, I think the last RFP, which is a request for proposal, was about $4 million, and probably about 90 agencies actually petitioned. So just think about that.
One of the other issues with the new Children and Family Justice Center being situated here in Seattle is it's not located where the family justice part of it, the children and family part of it, isn't located in a space that's convenient for people to get to. a lot of the people who need the services that will come out ultimately from the Children and Family Justice Center live in Kent. They live down in South King County. That's an incredible hardship, especially if you're court ordered to be somewhere at a certain time, or your parents need to be somewhere with you at a certain time. So along the way here, there were a lot of arguments made that these should be satellite facilities throughout the county. That would be effective. But here we are. We're going to build that. We're almost done with it, I think. But the county is making investments. And like I said before, just knowing the information isn't enough. The solutions and actually acting on the information is the real challenge at this point. And we'll talk about some of the organizations that you're involved in.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a national initiative called Credible Messengers. It began in New York a little over 20 years ago. The concept is nothing new. It's just about mentors or elders who have kind of lived in the space of life where they provide an intentional support for young folks and other, we say untraditional leaders. We build in that particular aspect. People who had one time been similarly situated as the young folks that they mentor. We give them an extensive training, 40-hour training. And then also you have community passageways doing wonderful work throughout Seattle and King County as well, doing a lot of deferments as well as and deferments is getting the young folks who are in the system out of the system and going on the front lines and arguing for not only their freedom, but access to opportunities in ways that are being denied to them and where they come from and their communities. Federal Way Youth Action Team, I had a lot, myself and my team, those of us with Credible Messengers and others in the community of Federal Way, had a lot to do with bringing in the space for young folks to be able to function in a way to grant them access to opportunities. And part of the reason why that consortium was developed through gentrification that was taking place in Seattle, pushing a lot of families out southward. One year, I believe there was an expansion and an explosion on the school systems. 1 year. So in 1 year, I think it was the elementary, and I want to say Todd Beamer has seen an expansion of over 300 students because of the building of Park 16, which was an apartment complex right next to Todd Beamer. And then all of a sudden, you had an increase of different people in that school that was not there the year before. But the teachers were the same, the curriculum was the same, the building was the same, there was no expansion to ready to be pulling this new expansion and this new culture. So what happens is that the SROs, which are the school resource officers, all they did was they had an uptick in sending young people to juvenile for truancy or just having a breakdown in communication, not understanding them culturally. And so it was like there needs to be something done to prevent these things from taking place. And so you see some of the solutions as people who are already in the community doing the work and trying to do it as effective as possible.
Will's being a little modest because I have seen the work he does in the community, and I've seen the work that Community Passageways has done, and Federal Way Youth Action Team, and it's inspiring and amazing. And yeah, you should pay attention to those groups. They're doing great work, but they're not making a lot of money, and I think that that's a really important point here. There are lots of community members. I talk to a lot of them who say they're ready to do the work. They want to do the work.
Correct.
The county isn't always great about getting the funding to the people who want to do the work.
Correct.
And that's been a challenge. That's been a challenge. And what do you think, Will, that the challenge is with that?
Well, I just think that what's really going on is just being honest with you. Those who are closest to the problem, using Glenn Martin's saying those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And what the county does not want to do, and I haven't seen them doing, is allow the people who are mostly impacted, who have a clear understanding, a clear analysis about these things, to be leading the way. And what I mean by that, I'm just being honest with you, if we're talking about gender and equity issues, it should be a woman leading that issue. If we're talking about LGBTQ issues, it shouldn't be a heterosexual male leading those issues. So when it comes to black and brown youth, everybody seems to convene at the table, but they don't want black and brown men or black and brown women to be leading those particular aspects that are impacting us in such a way that continues to handicap and cripple us. And so when you ask what are the things that need to be done, a lot of people need to get out the way, just being honest. Making decisions for people that they shouldn't be in positions of trying to make decisions for. They need to get out the way and allow people who are who has the best analysis around these particular issues should be leading these issues. And I always ask people when I do speaking engagements, who you think was the best president in South Africa? And everybody tells me, and you might come up with something different, but their analysis is Nelson Mandela. And the reason why is because he was impacted by the system that he had to do a complete overhaul to. So we've seen the analysis. It's the same thing when people go and fight over war, they come back, they need somebody who's been similarly situated to help them get through that process, right? And it's the same thing with the work that we're doing. It has to be top down, bottom up, and top down all the way through on those aspects. And if we're allowing people to be in positions who don't truly understand what the impacts of being crippled by the judicial system looks like and don't have a deep analysis around that, it's difficult for you to get to a point where you're doing zero youth detention work. That's a difficult project, and you can see the county is having a difficult aspect. One minute they're saying, here we're trying to make an investment with some of these organizations, but here are $200,000 to do so, but you have to also employ an entire staff, have an entire roster, have insurance around that, and then you can do some type of resources around the young folks that you work with, $100 stipends every 90 days or something to that point, right? But then your departments around these efforts have millions and millions of dollars in there, and people are getting paid to do work that, I'm just being honest with you, they don't really know how to do it in the best way. So they just need to get out the way. That would be my analysis.
I was really fortunate recently to be able to do an exit interview with retired King County Superior Court juvenile judge Judge J. Wesley St. Clair. He sat down with me to talk about his years on the bench and what he saw in juvenile court. And one of the things that he said to me that really resonated was that we need to get to kids sooner, because when kids get kicked out of the classroom, they end up in his courtroom. That's just the trajectory. The Best Starts for Kids program is designed to do that, to try to intervene early. We're in pretty early days, though.
Correct. And then the reality is, a little bit of my kickback even on that analysis is that it starts way before the classroom. It's a womb to prison pipeline. It has nothing to do with, I just got, introduced to this teacher who doesn't like me. It might, in some sense, speed up the process, but they already know people who are born in certain conditions, come from certain backgrounds and also certain particular zip codes, they have an estimation, right? And it's not just basically upon the schools or their interaction with the schools. These definitely are critical in those elements in crippling young folks' opportunities to have greater access. But the reality is we need to start early. And if we just focus our lens on young folks, I have to be honest with you, we're missing it by a long shot. And the reason why I say that, if I'm not right, I have three children. If I am not right, their opportunities are not going to be right. So we have to look at it also from a family engagement component, because if we don't take care of the people who are taking care of the youth, then that's when everything is going to spiral out of control. So we're just focusing on the young folks and not focusing on the mother, not focusing on the father in the conditions that they're being exposed to, then we're not giving credence or an opportunity for the young folks as well.
The complexity of the need and the problems cannot be understated, right? This is not easy work by any means. And I think that, the county even saying that it's committed to it is something. And with people like Will, who are willing to take the risks, to tell the county what he thinks, to do the work, we may be closer. We may be closer. One of the largest problems, though, and one of our most vexing here in Seattle is homelessness, right? Youth homelessness. Millionaire Lavish was homeless, right? And before I play his last piece of tape, the thing that we didn't end up putting into the story was, and the part that really broke my heart about Millionaire's homeless story, was that he told us that he moved every year since he started school. And the year that he became homeless, his father, he was living up in Ballard. He was having a pretty bad time at Ballard High School. And his father came to him and said they were going to raise the rent. His dad said, look, I could try to make this happen until we get evicted, or we can just split up. And they decided to split up, because what he told me is seeing that eviction notice on the door is worse. And I don't know, like, as the parent of a 12-year-old, I carried that a lot. Just the decision that he had to make with his dad to go out on his own. We got to solve that problem. We got to do a better job solving that problem.
What do you think are some of the things that you would need from others who are in position to support you and others like yourself? What should we be doing that can lessen the gap, that can lessen the struggle, that can lessen some of these issues to help impact us in a more positive way?
Mostly just help us with our basic needs, because I'm telling you, there's some people that will tell you, oh, stay out the streets, but they don't understand it's like that's all we have is the streets, because most of us don't got our parents. And I feel like what people need to do is mostly like really figure out what people need, like other than just asking them are they okay. Like, for example, I used to go to these places that say they'll help me, and they'd be like, okay, well, I don't have nothing free right now, housing-wise, but just give me a call, or I'll call you back in a week or two. They don't understand. In a week or two, I could be dead. You know? I could be dead, or I could be in jail. So it's like, I call it just like immediate help. Like, I mean, there's some people that need immediate help, and there's some people that can wait the 1 or 2 weeks. You feel me? But some people like me, no, you can't, because as those days go by, and I'm on these streets, mentally I'm getting weaker.
Well, I wonder how many of the kids that you mentor are homeless or have been homeless at one point. How do you see the homelessness problem for the people you work with?
Homelessness is definitely an issue. If you don't have a home, you're not rooted to something. You don't have a place or a space to kind of like calm yourself down, or just to get away from the days of activities. And I know some of us have that leisure to be able to do that, or the pleasure to do that. And there's a lot of young folks that I work with who are actually homeless. They're struggling. Their parents are struggling with a lot of different layers of trauma that contributes to their condition of homelessness. Some of them have been exposed to incarceration. In terms of parents, they've been exposed to drug addiction. They've been exposed to a lot of different things. And some of those things look like they might be just personal inhibitors. But a lot of them are also, they're really social determinants. They're social inhibitors, social impediments that has contributed to their usage, or may have contributed to them being incarcerated, trying to probably, write a bad check to feed their family because of other different conditional factors that exist. So there are a lot of young folks who are struggling with not having a home to call, on a personal level. They don't have a personal, place to call home.
Where do you see the hope? Where do you get your inspiration to do the work that you do?
Well, I have no choice. My skin is in the game.